Hey guys, welcome to the channel. In today's video we are talking about the brand new Prince of Persia game, The Lost Crown. But before we get into it guys, I'm Falso21, I love playing games and I love making videos. So if you guys like what you see, drop a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel. So we are starting the year off with a banger. Prince of Persia and The Lost Crown was super fun and really enjoyable. And if I'm being honest, it was way better than I had originally anticipated. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off with the story, you play as Sargon, one of the legendary immortals, and after the opening battle of the game, Prince Hassan gets captured and taken to Mount Koth. Sargon and the rest of the immortals are tasked with bringing him back. Soon after entering the mountain, we realize a couple of things. First thing, we can't leave. And the second thing, time seems to work differently here, as we run into several different fellow warriors that seemingly came in right before us, but somehow have been there days, years, and some so long that they have long since passed away. They also toy with the idea that there's multiple timelines all happening at this mountain at the same time, as pretty early on we find Menelaus's bow before he loses it, as well as running into multiple different versions of Sargon. Thankfully, they don't go too hard into the multiple timelines all happening at once in one place type thing, mainly because I feel like that storyline is very hard to get right and it's just very easy to get super confusing and just not very interesting. But with that said, the payoff with all of the time and timeline things is done really well here and has a pretty good payoff at the end. I won't go into too much spoilers here, as for me personally, I really enjoy the story and overall I had a good time with it. It was one of my more favorite parts of the game. Some of the cons I did have with the story though, I feel like they introduced a lot of characters just really fast, and then we just don't see them again for like hours, it seems like. And it was a little confusing trying to keep track of who is who and remember who's important outside of like a few characters. Another con that I had was the story does take a little bit to get going. Outside that beginning opening battle and outside Hassan getting taken down, there's not a whole lot story-wise that really happens. It's more or less just you exploring for like the first couple hours or so. But once I started discovering more and more, my enjoyment for the story grew. Gameplay-wise, I thought the combat was really fun. Sargon's 3-hit combo was pretty satisfying and was able to take out most of these smaller enemies. I also felt like you unlocked abilities at a fairly good pace, getting things like the dash or the double jump or even certain things that go with your bow. There's also a parry in the game, and it's one of those things that if done right are really satisfying to actually do. A lot of the smaller enemies, if you get the timing just right, will do like a little quick cutscene type thing of you one-shotting them. And with the bigger enemies or bosses, if you pull off multiple parries, it'll bring up your special meter gauge that will allow you to do a super move for a ton of damage. Some will even have like a glow goldish with an attack that can be parried, and if you land it, it does a ton of damage as well. My only real complaint as far as the combat and gameplay wise is that I felt like the latter half of the game, a lot of the enemies just felt really spongy. Oftentimes taking multiple of that 3-hit combo I talked about to take down just the standard enemies. And they don't really necessarily get harder combat-wise. They're still about just as difficult as you encountered some of these enemies earlier in the game. They just seem to have a bigger health bar. Isn't necessarily like, they're not, like I said, they're not harder. They just have bigger health bars, so they take you longer to take down, which was kind of annoying. But for the most part, I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed fighting the enemies, especially the boss fights. They were so much fun. I think almost all of the boss fights here in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown are all really fun and just so enjoyable to do. They're fun to play. And a lot of these bosses made you use all of your abilities. It was a lot of fun. Like there was just some abilities that I really didn't use all that much in the standard gameplay as I'm going through the levels, but some of these bosses more or less require you to use all of these abilities. For example, I didn't really use the Shadow of Smurg, I believe is how you say it. It's that ability which marks your location, and when you push the button again, you'll teleport back to that location. So for example, there are some bosses that would do an attack that would go over the entire screen, which I had to teleport back to the other side that he had already attacked. I did really enjoy that. It made use of all of your abilities. There was no throwaway abilities. They were all just as important. And just as presentation wise, all the bosses were super epic. super fun to fight, and for me, easily one of the best parts of the game. Some of my favorite bosses were Orod. He was super cool because you're out fighting on like a frozen in time like wreckage ship with a storm and lightning going around, and he definitely looks more like Kratos inspired. Super huge, super tough, and as I said, just an all-around really fun boss fight. My other top favorite was the Forest Queen. Honestly, it was after this boss fight that I was like, yep, I love this game. And on top of that, as I mentioned, all the boss fights are fairly challenging as well. I played this game just on normal difficulty, and I have to say I was getting my butt kicked a lot by a lot of these bosses. Thankfully, whenever you lost, it would let you just jump right back into the boss fight, and the loading screens are all fairly quick as well. My only con with the bosses is really just one boss in particular, and it was the Menelaus fight. He is more of a ranged fighter, so he's got his bow, and he's basically jumping around the map shooting you with his bow and arrow, and it was just hard because Sargon is more of a melee character, so it was hard to like actually get close to him and get some attacks off without him jumping across the map. And because of that, it took me like 10 minutes to finally beat Menelaus, and there were so many times, I think there was like 2 or 3 times where I got like just a sliver of health left and he killed me. And it was so frustrating because, like I said, this took me like 10 minutes to do. Not all the other boss fights I thought were great. Like I said, they were all very challenging. Menelaus specifically for me. But outside of the Menelaus boss fight, I really enjoyed literally all of them. The snake boss fight was fun. Orod was fun. The last boss fight was insane with multiple different phases. All really fun boss fights. Easily the best part of the game for me. Along with the boss fights, the platforming in this game was so much fun. I actually had a blast trying to navigate through all the levels and jumping over traps and obstacles. It was super fun and super satisfying, especially when you got to the end of a very long run. Like, there were quite a few levels that just had you jumping through saws and flipping around and teleporting and all that good stuff. And by the time you got to the other side, it was just so satisfying that you finally overcome it. As I mentioned earlier, you do die a lot, and the load screens are super quick, so even when you did die and ran out of healing items to get through this certain thing, you could jump right back into it fairly quickly. One of the things that I also really liked with just the platforming and whatnot in general is that you could take a snapshot of the map. So like if there's a part that you couldn't get past yet or that was blocked, you could take a snapshot and then it would save it on the map so that when you finally did get that ability, you can go back, enter that area, or get that item. So I thought that was really cool. Something I wish that was in Metroid Dread, which at the time was probably my personal favorite platformer. Metroid Dread is awesome. And that was just something that I wish that you could do in that game, because there are certain things I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go back. And then I'm thinking back like hours later when I finally got this ability, I'm like, where was that thing at again? Along the same lines, I also really liked that they had an option to do the guided mode, which basically just puts a pinpoint on the map saying, hey, go here. This is the main objective. Go this way. Doesn't tell you how to get there. It just says like, hey, it's over here. As I mentioned in Metroid Dread, was half the time I was just lost, not knowing where to go. So having like a little bit of a direction of saying like, hey, this is where you need to go was really nice. And my only con with the platforming and the general gameplay was, and this is probably my biggest con for the game, was that not all of the trees were like the fast travel system. It was like some of the whack trees, or walk, however you say it, had like a little statue that you can fast travel next to, but not every single one of them had that, and some of them didn't even have, like, there's a few fast travel points that were just kind of random. They weren't super close to a tree, and the reason it was annoying is because you would fast travel, but if you didn't rest at the tree that was closest to that fast travel point, say you're way up at the top of the map and you fast travel to the bottom of the map, and you died, but you didn't hit a tree or rest at one of the trees that you had already gotten, you would respawn all the way back at the top of the map. And I can't tell you how many times that happened. It was so annoying, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I am not even anywhere close to where I was just at. So now I gotta run over to this fast travel down, then run out of my way to rest at a tree. Like, why didn't they just make the trees fast travel points, or just not have fast travel at all? Like, I wouldn't be so upset. But because since it's saved, you rest at this tree up here, it wants to respawn you way the heck over there. So that was a lot of time where I just felt like the game was wasting my time, where I'm like, seriously, like, is this really necessary? It's not like a huge deal, but it was one of those inconveniences that just really annoyed me. And honestly, like, towards the latter half of the game, like I was resting at every single tree, even if I didn't want to, like I had full health or whatever. Like it was just annoying that I had to make sure to go out of my way to always rest so that I wouldn't like respawn all the way at the other side of the map. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I loved the combat, I loved the bosses, they were all so cool and just so much fun to just play. I really enjoyed all the platforming, and it's right up there with my favorite platformers like Metroid Dread. In some ways, and a lot of ways, I think that this game does surpass Metroid Dread. They do a lot of things that I really enjoyed, specifically the guided mode and being able to put points on the map that you can go back to. All the platforming was really cool. I loved all the traps and obstacles that you had to navigate through. I really loved the art style and just the overall style that they were trying to go for with Prince of Persia. I also had a really good time with the story. It does take a little bit to get going, but once it starts going, the story is really fun. And that is why I'm going to give Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown a 9 out of 10. The game was so good, and I honestly didn't anticipate that it being this good. Like when it first came out, I remember seeing trailers and I'm like, oh yeah, that looks good, I'm gonna grab that. I like the platformers, I like Metroid Dread, I'll give this a shot. And it totally blew me away. Such a fun game. And as I said earlier, we are starting the year off with an absolute banger. If you guys haven't played this game yet or kind of on the fence about it, I highly recommend you guys go out and get Prince of Persia. It's not even a full price game. I think I paid like 40 bucks for it, which is a steal. This game is so much fun. Thank you guys for watching. That is going to be it for my Prince of Persia and the Lost Crown review. If you guys enjoyed it, be sure to leave us a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And we'll catch you guys on the next video.